Hi guys, one of the questions that I just received on my Instagram during my Q&A session was how do you apply digital lighting? And this is a really good question, and there are so many ways that you can actually do it, but I've found like one particular way that I find really easy and creates really good result fast, which I personally like because I have not a lot of patience, which I should definitely work on. But yeah, until then, this is my quick and easy method of applying digital lighting on color. I could of course just write something, but I realized that that would probably take me a lot of time to explain, and it wouldn't be the same as if I just explained it here on my ProCreate app. And the thing is, what's so great about ProCreate is that it has a lot of the same ground core abilities like Photoshop has. So you have your layers right here, and I put my lineart layer right here. And of course it functions the same way as Photoshop, so when I apply a color, let's say that this little kitty is going to be orange, because we do like that color. You can see when I need to make that bigger. When I apply, it doesn't smudge out the line art, which is really great, especially when working with a picture where you want the line art to be there. Otherwise, you can just put the layer on top by just pushing it down here, and then you can remove it over it. But I want my line art on top because I don't want it to be smudged out, at least not for now. Why am I explaining all of this? It's because part of digital lighting kind of goes together with the concept of coloring. You need to have a good base color and a form to apply lighting. You can't do it on a black and white. Or you can, but then you still need to have like base color, or just a base foundation. For example, if I were to pick a gray color right here and draw it in, I still then have something to put my light on, right? But yeah, I'll try to do it slowly so you guys can catch up. I have my my blank layer right here, and I am going to apply some color. And by the way, this is my first video tutorial, so if you guys don't like this one, you're very welcome to comment and give me some critique, but be gentle. So I think this one is a bit too dark. Let's play with a lighter one here. And now we're just going. I'm gonna speed up this video just for the tail. I just wanted to you know, just smooth it out a bit like that. I think it gives like a nice effect since I didn't finish that tail. I could leave it here, but I think I'm just going to take my eraser up here and just, you know, very roughly erase some of the color to create like those hairs. This isn't something that you need to be too specific with, in my opinion, because sometimes that sort of like sketchy look, I find it really nice, but it's up to you guys. But at least just for look's sake, we'll do it right here. There. I think that's good enough for the purpose of this video. So now you have like a base color, and that functions really nicely. Oh, I just forgot to say that the brush that I mainly use for painting is this one called a round brush. I made my own version of it right here that I haven't renamed, and then I modified it into some other brushes for details. I think I'm gonna make a video separately explaining how I create my own brushes in ProCreate, because that has been an important thing to me to figure out, and I guess that you would like it too, if you're a user of ProCreate, that is. Okay, what you can do here in ProCreate is you can leave the color there, and you can draw directly on it, or you can press select, and now it has selected like the outline of that color, and then you can create a new layer, and then you can pick a color that you want in that layer, and you can apply it. Let's say that we want the tip of this to be a bit more bright, or we just like to have a little white in its face. That looks kind of cute, and maybe some white socks. This is one way you can do it. You can also just take 2 fingers and then lock that layer, and then it will create the same effect, and you won't draw outside the color block that you did. But I like to have like my colors in separate layers, and then I can always merge them if I feel like it. But I mean, it depends on how you like to work and how secure you feel in it. For this small drawing, I could just have drawn directly on that layer, but I guess I just like to show you that there is options. And you know, this stage of the drawing is pretty much just working from like your own knowledge of how is the drawing supposed to look like. I've always been fairly good with animals without using reference, which is, you know, sometimes it's actually pretty stupid. You should use reference, and I would recommend you finding a picture and drawing from that, but because I have a lot of it in my memory, I tend to be a little bit lazy and just, you know, draw from memory. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and I have to find a picture, but mostly it's just memory stuff. And I seem to recall having a cat a long time ago when I was a kid, and it had a color like this, and that is just what I'm basing this stuff on. And as I said before, I kind of like the sketchy look a little bit, so that is just what I'm working with here. For me, it doesn't have to be too perfect. I think I'm just gonna apply all other colors apart from the base color on this layer, because I don't want to create new layer every time, but you can do that if you want to. Remember, every time you shift a color tone, to move it around a bit to give, you know, different kinds of midtones to it. Usually you don't just pick a color. Let's say we pick this color and then we just go lighter and we just go darker. I make sure to move it around a little bit to get like different pigments in it. And it's gonna have a bit of shade in its ears, like that. And I also wanted to have a bit of shade on the nose. Whoops. And it would probably have like some markings on it here as well. But I'm not gonna apply too much of those, just a little bit here. And I'm gonna explain later why I won't go too much into detail with that. I think we should opt for maybe an interesting green color for the eyes. Sometimes cats have green eyes. It's very rare, but it sticks out apart from the yellow. I actually follow a cat on Instagram called Smoothie the Cat, and I also honestly think that I have kind of a picture in head when I do this. As I said, I draw from memory, and some of that memory is maybe stuff that I'd seen around. And I have seen a picture of Smoothie the Cat stretching sort of like this. Then I'm going to apply some lighting, just a little bit Normally I would wait with that until the very end, but sometimes I can't wait and I need to see how it looks immediately. Some of you can probably relate to that. And just a bit of white in there to draw it out a bit more. And you can always take this tool and sort of mix it up together if the lines are a bit too hard on the edges. You should remember though that this won't be possible to do if you have the color on separate layer. Then you will only be able to mix the color that you're working with on that particular layer, which is why it could be a good thing to put all the colors in one layer. But there are costs and benefits. Do you say that? No, you say pros and cons. Sorry for my bad English about this, because of course then you can't go in and change your base color without changing the whole thing. And what I mean about that is, like for example, if I want to change this color, I can go into color balance, for example, and I can sort of play around with the midtones and highlights. It's not really that noticeable in color balance. Let's try this. Yeah, here you can see it. And I don't change the color that I have on a different layer, I only change the base color. But of course that is not too relevant right now. Oh, I removed the select bag on. Here we go. But the point of this is just to apply a very, very simple base color that we are going to apply lighting on later. And the more detail you put into this on this layer, the more the color has to work from, in a way. So it does make sense to just, take a little time with this layer. You can also go in and apply a little bit of shadow where you know that there would probably be shadow. So for example, at the tail, it makes like a little turn there, so it would cover the light. The same with this area right here, it would probably be darker. And right here with the foot. This is not super necessary because naturally when you paint in light in a drawing, you also paint in a shade. You can't really have light without shades. So it will come naturally. I just like to apply just a little bit of it. And this is normally the shade that would just be created by the figure itself. So for example, if you create light, you can say it comes from here, right? And then that casts the light, and then it casts the shade. But there will be some, I don't know what you could call it, object shade from the object itself that you can apply. And again, I'm not a professional. Everything I know is self-taught, but this is just something that makes sense in my head, that you would have those two kinds of shading, one from the object itself and then from external sources. I don't know if I'm explaining that properly, but it makes sense to me anyway. Okay, so now we have a base color. I'm pretty happy about that. You could have applied a bit more brown maybe up here with a bigger brush, but I mean, I kind of like the basic look of this. So now it gets interesting. Now you need to apply your shade. We're not going to remove this select because we need it to apply the shade. So what we do is we make another layer, and then we press here. You can see it's an N for normal, and we put that on multiply. And then you pick a shade, and this is really funny. At least I think so, because I learned a trick, which is you shouldn't just apply a gray shade, because normally there will be a lot of pigment in a shade. And a pigment that I like to go to is actually dark blue with a little bit of gray tones in it. So I think this is a good color. But you know, the rule of thumb for me anyways is that you pick a shade that matches the surroundings. So if you imagine this cat is in front of a fireplace, you could probably go for a kind of red, brownish color for the shade. But it wouldn't really bring out any blue pigment. And normally there is actually a lot of blue pigment in all kinds of colors. I want to explain to you why that is. I don't know. It's just something that I figured out. Not just by reading about it, but actually more trial and error. So I'm gonna go with the dark blue here. And what you do is ProCreate is so fancy that you can just press this, and then you can drag it down, and then it colors it. The problem with this is that it's only coloring like the firm coloring, and this is fading out a bit. So if you have that problem, you just select it. You go in and you pick an airbrush that you know is dense, and density means that it's not gonna fade out in opacity. This is opacity. And then you just start to block in the color, and as you can see, it's also coloring the faded color of the tail. So, I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you can sort of sense, you know, some of the facial expression on the kitty. Now, if I had left this on normal, I mean, it would block out all the coloring. But on multiply, you still kind of have the coloring fading through. I think it's a bit too dense though, this shade. So I am going to put it maybe here on 75. That seems like a good idea. Now, I need to paint in the light, which also means that I'm erasing some of the shade. And I find this really, really cool because you immediately create so much form. And I think I'm gonna use a soft airbrush to do that. This icon right here means that this is one of my modified brushes. I modified it from this one, so it fitted my need. Now we're gonna figure out where the light comes from. I think the idea of the cat being near a fireplace or a lamp is a good idea. And then the lighting would come from maybe like a lower angle and not so much on top. And also I want it to come from the right side because I want the face to be hit by a bit of lighting. And is this important, the angle of the light? Yes, it is. Because the angle of the light will determine, first of all, where on the object it will hit, but also like how big a surface of it will be hit. If it's from the top, most of it will be hit. For example, then only down here there would probably be shade. So it would be something like this, right? That's okay, but I don't think that allows enough form of the character. So I want it to be from a lower angle, so we're probably gonna have like half of it in shade. And this is where you have to practice, because, you know, it's sort of in your hand and in your mind and memory how you remember lighting hits an object. Of course, you can study it, you can look on other objects, but I think that trial and error was, you know, the best for me anyway. I'm gonna continue with this because I talk too much. Okay, so we decided on a downward angle. So I think it's probably gonna hit around here. It hits the back like this, and it curves a little bit because the cat has a curved back. And the same with the tail, it sort of like follows it a little bit. But because there is kind of like an angle here, it probably won't hit that part right here. So we're gonna keep that in shade. It's gonna hit the arm and the top of the paw, right here. And of course, the face. That is the really important part of this character. And this is usually where I want to go in and be a bit more detailed about the whole thing. So I think it's gonna hit the forehead, little part of the nose, the side right here, and the cheek. Just like so. And of course also the ear. And this is where applying light with this particular technique is really good, because when it's in multiply and you just erase it, you keep that coloring. And because the ears are so thin, a light will probably shine through it. You can emphasize that later, and I'll show you. Some of the light will probably bounce over the forehead right here. Will be a bit sharper on the nose. We like that because it emphasizes the face. Remember, drawing in light and shade is also creating form and creating that sort of like 3D effect that we really like when we're, you know, drawing characters, because it brings them to light, and immediately you can also see that this character is brought to light. I'm gonna apply a bit more on this to make it pop out. It doesn't matter that it's a bit, you know, the limit here is so bright and it's not fading all the way out, because we do want, again, to emphasize the form of this kitty. I think a little light will hit this eye as well. Of course, this eye will be lit up. If we imagine the cat has a bit of like an edge over its brows, it will probably hit here as well. And also here it will be. So you can probably see the effect that the whole thing is starting to take. Now, let's just do that. Here, this arm will create a shade right about here. But the light will probably still hit this arm. So here we have to take in consideration that that we have a shade that is cast from the object itself. So we're just going to put in a light shade here. And we still imagine like the shade of that arm will go along down this way. Bit of light will be cast here, but then the paw probably won't put this part into shade. So that is probably going to be hit by a little light, like that. I think we, as I look at it now, I think we do want to have like a bit more light on this. Just like so. Remember, it has like a ridge right there, so we emphasize the curve. There. We're not quite finished yet, because there is also a sort of lighting that is called ground light, which is, or not just ground light, but like light that is casted off by other objects in the room. So if we imagine this kitty is in a room and we have a lighting coming from here, it will probably hit something over here as well. Let's say there's a wall, and that will cast off another light. It won't be as sharp or as dense, but it will still be there. So what I normally like to do is to make a little bit of a cast off light on the other side of the cat, just a little bit. And sometimes you do it too much and you have to go back and erase it, because this can kind of ruin your shading if you overdo it. But it can also really make it look nice if you do it just perfectly. And sometimes you don't, maybe you don't even notice it that much. But the subconsciousness of the brain or the eye or whatever will, you know, recognize the pictures being more lively in a way. So this is actually the basic way of coloring in light. You could just leave it there, but I do like to apply another layer. And I was once told that when you apply like a second layer of light, because this is basically just erasing the shadow of the cat, but maybe you do want to have like a specific emphasis on the color of the light. So even though we have picked like a blue pigment for the shadow color, maybe we do still want that warmth of maybe like a fireplace. And I was told that when you color that in, you should use color burn. But, I mean, this was actually something that I was told by a professional who works with this for a living. But I actually figured that for my particular way of working, I like to put that layer in overlay instead. And I mean, this is a very good example on sometimes you can read all the books and get all the professional help that you want, but maybe it won't fit your particular style of drawing. So it's really a question of figuring out what you want to do, and that is completely okay. And that maybe it sounds stupid for me to say that it's okay that you figure out your own way of doing it, but I needed to tell myself that because I was so stuck on when I started with digital drawing that there is a particular way of doing things, and there isn't. You can do whatever you want, as long as it looks good, I guess. But anyways, the final stage of lighting, at least for the main work, is this stage. And what you do is you draw in that extra light, and I guess this is what really makes it come alive. You can sort of see how it gives a warm feeling to the character. And what I do is I take an airbrush that is kind of big, and I just move it over the lighting that I already did. And that is how I apply like the first steps of that. And remember what I told you about the ear? This is actually a good step for drawing in that extra light that shines through the thin skin of those ears. And there you go. Now it's really just a question of knowing when to stop. And sometimes I don't know that and I just continue. But yeah, this is actually pretty much it. From now on, I would probably just play around with it a little. Maybe go to the line art and just trying to figure out if I could do something with that, maybe make it a bit lighter. Whoops. Go into the color balance of it and make it maybe a bit more brown, like that, to get the toughness of the pitch black line art away. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe I would put a layer on top of this layer, and I would take my homemade hard airbrush or my painting brush. Actually, come to think of it, I would probably use that one, and go in and do basically just some rendering. This depends on what kind of look you're going for, but maybe draw some hairs in there, erase some of those lines to give it a softer look. You could apply a little bit of highlighting on the nose and around the eyes. But this is really up to you. Some really like, the tough lines, and I'm definitely one of those. I like to keep the lines because I like that graphic novel look to it. But I have to say that depending on what you're drawing, it's also really nice to work with just painting in the colors. Then I would probably have made like a softer line art to begin with. Oh yeah, I forgot to say that that what you can actually do after all of this is applied is make a new layer and make it multiply, and pick a color that you want, and go in, pick a brush just like that, and then start painting in some spots or stripes, for example, and see where that takes you. You can also put this layer into not only multiply but also overlay if you want to. That works a bit more with the coloring. You can see it gives it sort of like a very hard saturated color. Some people like that, and I can definitely see the point of it. I think I just prefer the multiply mode because it keeps the color very close to the color that you pick, and that gives a bit more control to it. But yeah, all that is completely up to you. First step is definitely just drawing in the digital color, and this is the best way that I can show you guys how to do it. All of these methods that I've used here applies to Photoshop as well, so that is awesome. And yeah, I hope you liked it, and leave me a comment if you have some critiques, whether it's good or bad. Just shoot, and if you want, give a like, this is a like, and subscribe. Bye!